you on drugs?
Yes.
Sorry to hear you, bitch.
I don't mind if you're into guy. It's not like anyone's 100% straight or 100% gay.
What the fuck is wrong with you?
You expect me to stand here next to my best friend who's been lying to me and I'm
Okay.
literally gonna get violent?
Your whole family is so fucking weird.
You guys can all judge me if you want, but I do not care. I have never, ever been happier.
It's hard to believe it's been 6 years since the first trailer for Euphoria was released. But time moves fast when season 1 was followed by a global pandemic, on top of the fact that we live in an era where the best shows take years between seasons to come out. Except Abbott Elementary. Them be on the move. Every time I blink there's a new season and they all fire. Shout out to Quentin and the gang. But back to business, this is not about them. I bring up the first trailer for Euphoria because Euphoria has been controversial since the moment it was released. If you're a millennial like I am, you might remember when this ad campaign for the only Gossip Girl we recognize dropped in 2008 and how parents were losing their minds that this show for and about teenagers was marketing itself with sex. The American past is funny because depending on what you're looking at, the public was either delighting in obscenity or clutching the out of their pearls for less. It's so easy to compare Gossip Girl's 2008 campaign to the 2019 Euphoria trailer and think we've gotten way more risque. But I was alive in the early 2000s and I've seen every American Pie, so I know that that's not the case. Although I will say, there are some important distinctions between Gossip Girl, Euphoria, and the American Pies of the world. American Pie was about teenagers and far raunchier, sicker, and poorly aged than anything we've ever seen in either Gossip Girl or Euphoria. But American Pie was rated R and in theaters, so we knew what we were getting, and the teenagers weren't supposed to be able to get into the theater to see it in the first place. And despite Euphoria being far wilder than Gossip Girl could have ever imagined being, Gossip Girl was truly a show for teenagers. It was a CW show, home for teenage entertainment, like The Vampire Diaries, The Originals, Jane the Virgin, the list goes on. Whereas Euphoria may be about teenagers, for some illogical reason, because it really don't make any sense how teenagers would be participating in the shenanigans they do in the way that they do in Euphoria. But nevertheless, while the show may be about teenagers, not only has the creator Sam Levinson said repeatedly that it's not for teenagers, despite the show going on to be adored by teenagers, I think his assertion is fair considering that Euphoria is an HBO show. So I think they should get a little leeway from the Euphoria's exploiting, sexualizing, and corrupting teens crowd. Euphoria wasn't brought to us by the CW, Nickelodeon, Disney, or my personal childhood favorite, The End. If you don't remember The End, it was the nighttime version of Nickelodeon for the big kids, and it housed phenomenal teen dramas like Degrassi, Radio Free Roscoe, Instant Star, Miracle Boys, and more. Absolutely nobody was doing it like The End, and that is a hill I'm willing to die on, you hear me? Degrassi, it goes there, lives in my mother mind rent free. But even Degrassi High and Degrassi The Next Generation, shit, even Degrassi The Next Class, always had to deal with parents who thought it was too grown and inappropriate for their kids to watch. Despite the fact that I think anybody who actually watched any era of Degrassi knows that it was a damn near perfect show when it came to giving teens drama and excitement with a purpose and a lesson designed to help us better navigate serious and traumatic situations that we might actually face as teenagers. But my mommy wasn't trying to hear all that shit out. She wouldn't let me watch it, but I found a way. But I say all that to say, Euphoria being controversial was inevitable. There is no show designed for or about teenagers that explores heavy-ass themes like sex, drugs, and abuse that doesn't meet controversy, no matter how they go about doing it. So I was not shocked when folk raised their eyebrow at the trailer the moment they heard Zendaya say she was a drug addict and realized that she and all the other characters were in high school. And I do understand and even share in a lot of the criticisms and concerns people have about the show, considering that teenagers love it, whether they intended for teenagers to love the show or not. That being said, I'm 32 and I don't have no children and I don't be around no teenagers, so that's your problem. If y'all want to salivate and talk about what kind of example the show is setting for kids, there are a million excellent YouTube video essays for you to get your mouth wet on after you finish watching this video. I have got different things to discuss because unlike the critics, the moment the Euphoria trailer dropped, I knew that I was gonna be locked in. It had everything I needed. I trust HBO to make heat. The cinematography looked beautiful. Jacob Elordi is beautiful. Zendaya looked like she was gonna be acting her ass off, and the soundtrack was bumping off the rip. So when Euphoria season 1 dropped, your girl was sat. And you know what? I really enjoyed it, despite the fact that absolutely nobody in Euphoria is enjoying themselves. And I do mean nobody. There is zero euphoria to be found in Euphoria. Heavy than a mother, young people miserable than a mother. Unlike Insecure, where the name of the show speaks to what's at the core of why the characters do what they do and go through what they go through, Euphoria speaks to what's missing from the lives of its characters, what they wish they had, what characters like the show's sort of protagonist Rue searches for in her drug use but never finds. The only thing fun, euphoric, and alive in Euphoria is the cinematography, the bold color choices, the makeup, the aesthetic, the music, and the vibes, which is especially important in Euphoria, because what I have come to realize is that Euphoria is not a show. It's an art piece. Euphoria is a vibey ass, artsy ass drama that you are meant to feel. When you watch Euphoria, how you feel about the show and how much you enjoy it depends significantly on how much you with the vibe of the show and what it makes you feel through the music and imagery it utilizes. A lot of heavy shit happens in Euphoria. But there isn't truly a plot, because Euphoria doesn't really have a story it's telling or a point it's making. It has vibes and emotions that it wants you to feel, and they have deep themes that they lightly want to explore through actors giving phenomenal and heavy performances, but playing characters who are only meant to serve as examples, illustrations of the consequences of certain kinds of traumas, abuses, stereotypes, and expectations. The characters were not meant to grow, which is why the characters in Euphoria have depth, but they don't have development, because they're not meant to transform or build into anything, because the show isn't telling a story. It's an art piece meant to illustrate certain themes to you, which is why most, if not all, of the characters just fall deeper and deeper into the worst possible consequences of the trauma that they're meant to illustrate to us as the audience. And that can be frustrating to a viewer who thinks they're there for a story and to invest in characters who grow, evolve, overcome, and transform. But it makes perfect sense if you realize that you're watching an art piece where each character has a theme or trauma they're meant to show you just enough of to evoke some thoughts and feelings in you as the viewer that you can explore on your own time. The show is not trying to be in that conversation with you. It's not inviting you into a pointed discussion. You know, like when you look at an art piece and they tell you art is open to interpretation, so the artist won't tell you exactly what you're supposed to think about it, or whether your interpretation is right, or exactly what they were thinking or hoped you take away from it. That's Euphoria. It's not a story with a point. It's a collection of themes and feelings it's trying to evoke, and it does not care all too much what we make of it, which is a very intelligent, nuanced, and nice way of saying that watch Euphoria for the vibes, and Euphoria does not really have a point, which I think is fine. There is a place for everything, and like art, we're not all gonna with and feel the same shit. People who love Euphoria love it because of what it makes them feel and the kind of singular experience and thoughts it evokes in whatever comes to your mind as you watch all these dreamy ass sequences surrounded by traumatic events, and because the actors are acting their asses off, let's be real. But even though Euphoria doesn't have a specific point it's making, it gives us a lot for us to interpret so we can arrive at points of our own, because that's the point of art. So I wanted to analyze some of the main characters in Euphoria and get to the point of all the trauma the characters experienced and inflicted, so we can walk away with some valuable lessons, you know, like Degrassi would have done. But before I do that, let me tell you about this video's sponsor, ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free, say it with me, free 99 website and app where you can search and compare high quality in-network doctors, choose the right one for your needs, and click to instantly book an appointment for the free. And ZocDoc isn't just for one type of care. They have more than 100,000 providers across nearly every specialty, from primary care to dental health, eye care to urgent care, and more. It's the one-stop shop for all your healthcare needs. No need to call doctor's offices and wait on hold either. ZocDoc lets you do everything online. I always make sure y'all understand that I have been using ZocDoc since I was in college, okay? Long before I ever had a platform, long before I was a lawyer, long before all of that. Which is why I especially love being sponsored by them, because I genuinely have no idea how people book all their medical appointments without ZocDoc. What y'all is be doing without ZocDoc? Calling individual doctor's offices? Booking on all their different websites? No, baby. Ain't no way I'm doing that when I could click on ZocDoc and be shown any and every doctor who takes my insurance for whatever I need to see them for and all their availability and book all my appointments right then and there for free. It is so easy, which is why I've been using them from Adam. Plus, they help you get the appointments real fast too, typically within just 24 to 72 hours of booking, and you could even score same-day appointments. So stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/IlluminatiPop. Also linked in the description to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. Thanks again to ZocDoc for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get back to it. It's only right that we start with the series' sorta protagonist, Rue, played by Zendaya. And I say sorta, because although the show begins with Rue, and she's the narrator whose eyes we see most of the show through, protagonist to me usually denotes that you have a main character whose story you're telling and going somewhere with. But Euphoria doesn't have a point, remember? And it has an ensemble cast. So you're not really watching for Rue, unless she's your fave. And I also think it's easy to forget she's even kinda supposed to be the main character. It more so just feels like she happens to be the character they chose to narrate. She often has very little to do with the main shit the show explores via the other main characters. That being said, I'm fine with that, because Zendaya is always the main character in my books. My bitch is a star. I'm a star! And she's acting her ass off as Rue. Rue is the vehicle through which the show explores the effects of mental illness, grief, and addiction. Rue is a queer biracial teenager who, even prior to becoming addicted to drugs, was already struggling with OCD and a host of other mental illnesses. But she becomes addicted to drugs after she began taking her father's leftover medication after he died from cancer. The show begins with Rue 5 days out of rehab, where she was sent when her younger sister, played by Storm Reed, who's also acting her ass off, found her OD'd. Despite being fresh out of rehab, Rue is already back on drugs that she buys from her friend and dealer Fezco, played by the late Angus Cloud, and she lies to her mom, who she repeatedly lashes out at for trying to keep her off drugs. Rue is the walking physical manifestation of depression, whose drug addiction was born out of trying to cope with the loss of her father, and in an attempt to escape from her reality. But it doesn't work. The pretty much only time we see Rue experience a moment of happiness is when she's with Jules. And even her love for Jules doesn't change as she's deep in the throes of addiction. Rue's battles with addiction and relapse are so intense. And I think part of what it makes it feel so particularly tragic is that Rue is so young. She's a teenager in high school, and at her young age, she has already become addicted to drugs, OD'd, and been in and out of rehab. But it's because, despite her young age, she's been battling serious mental health issues for as long as she can remember, and she's already experienced the pain of losing a parent and having to grieve a parent. The shallow interpretation of Rue would be that she has a serious drug problem that almost killed her and will likely kill her if she keeps going the way she's going, and she has a mother and sister who loves her to death and are visibly suffering because of her choices, as well as a childhood best friend, Lexi, whose love she takes advantage of in order to continue doing drugs at the expense of herself and anyone who loves her, but she keeps on doing it anyway because she's selfish and doesn't have a will to live. Again, that's the shallow interpretation. There are so many painful scenes in Euphoria where Rue relapses, goes through withdrawal, or lashes out on her mother, her sister, Jules, Fez, anybody standing in between her and her addiction. And while that shit can seem frustrating to watch because you feel so bad for the people feeling the effects of Rue's addiction and behavior, and you feel bad for Rue, but you're angry at her choices because you want better for her, I think the important takeaways from Rue are that 1, addiction is often rooted in trauma. 2, trying to support someone through addiction and relapse is hard. The person you are trying to help will lash out at you, they will hurt your feelings, they will disappoint you, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't help them. 3, mental health issues, trauma, and addiction are all damn near impossible to deal with without emotional and financial support. And even with those things, it's still difficult. 4, the decision to get help and truly turn their life around is ultimately their own. And last but not least, relapse will happen. And it does not mean the person is a lost cause. We've somehow come to believe as a society that a person battling addiction is supposed to be able to just kick the habit, stop and never do it again. And if they do relapse, we consider it a failure, them falling off the wagon, proof that they haven't changed or will never stop doing the drugs. But that's incorrect. Relapse is quite literally a part of addiction and recovery. People are going to relapse at some point, at least a few times statistically, before they stop for good. And even then, a person is not free from their battle with addiction, even after they've stopped doing drugs. It's something they always have to work at. It's important to me that people internalize the fact that relapse will happen, because believing otherwise prevents us from truly helping and supporting people battling and recovering from addiction, even with the best of intentions. And I'll explain what I mean to you. For those of you who don't know, I used to be a public defender in New York City, meaning I represented people who could not afford a lawyer in their criminal cases. In New York City, progressive prosecutors and judges, whose heart is probably in the right place, like to send clients who have drug problems and/or drug-related cases into what they called the drug part, which was a special courtroom where they'd often offer your clients some kind of mandatory drug program that they could complete in exchange for getting their cases dismissed or to plea for a reduced charge. The problem with these court parts is they operate on the belief that people battling with addictions should not relapse, that relapse is a failure or proof that they're a lost cause. So what would often happen is, when some of the people battling addiction inevitably relapse at one point or another, these court parts that were allegedly designed to help them punish them harsher for what is actually a natural and expected part of recovery, so they in their criminal cases end up in a worse place than when they started. I say all that to say, Rue's depiction for me is a reminder that as frustrating, selfish, and self-destructive as it might look to see someone literally fresh out of rehab, still doing drugs, and stressing her mother the out, despite having traumatized the out of her little sister who was already grieving the loss of their father, then had to find her big sister OD'd knocking on death's door, relapse is a part of recovery. Rue is not a lost cause, and her loved ones are not wrong not to give up on her. But it does come at a cost to their own mental well-being and the relationships they have with her. Rue stumbles repeatedly throughout the series, but she does get to a place where she chooses sobriety, and I think that's dope. Because so often we create arbitrary numbers as to how many times a person is allowed to make the same mistake before we lose all faith in their ability to make different choices. But in reality, up a lot before a lesson sets in. And I think Rue is a great illustration of that. I also can't end this Rue section without mentioning how Zendaya's musical number in the season 1 finale ate so damn bad. Next up we have Nate, played by Jacob Elordi. First of all, let me take a second to bark like a dog, because Jacob Elordi is so goddamn fine. No, serious, my God. Jacob Elordi is some of white people's best work. That man so stinking fine, there ain't even no reason for it. Matter of fact, I refuse to move on before we take the necessary amount of time to look at the material. Run the fan cam, Aaron.
Are you like fucking Tony Montana? What's the plan? Gonna be living in a mansion, fucking pet tigers and shit? Go fuck yourself.
In addition to being fine as the Jacob Elordi was acting his mother ass off in Euphoria, you hear me? The award show snubbed the my boy for his portrayal as Nate, because when I tell y'all this, Jacob was acting down as Nate, you need to hear me and hear me good. Now that that's out the way, let's talk about Nate as a character. Nate's father Cal, and Nate's friends McKay are all vehicles through which we can explore toxic masculinity, the pressure to perform toxic masculinity, and the consequences of performing toxic masculinity. But Nate is the character who best illustrates it all, and I'll explain why. Nate's father Cal was played by fine-ass Eric Dane, but despite how fine Eric Dane is in real life, Cal Jacobs is a sick son of a bitch who abuses his children, statutorily rapes underage girls like Jules, and obviously cheats on Nate's mother routinely. But how he came to be a sick son of a bitch is important to how Nate became who he is, and those themes I previously mentioned. Nate's father is a closeted queer man whose internalized homophobia and rigid definition of masculinity will not allow him to simply be a queer man. So instead, he performs hypermasculinity in the daytime, which to him means owning a construction business and verbally and physically abusing his son in order to make his son perform the exact kind of masculinity that Cal himself feels prisoner to. And in the nighttime, he cheats on his wife with gay men and trans women. And when he does have sex with gay men or trans women, as we saw when he had sex with underage Jules, who told him she was 22, he was incredibly aggressive because dominating her and showing no regard to her pleasure or experience was part of how he reconciles his fear that queer sex means he's less than a man. Cal and Jules' sex scene is an illustration of what it looks like when a man has committed to performing this kind of hypermasculinity and believes that in order to feel like a man, he must in some way degrade or dominate whoever he's sleeping with. That's why men struggling with their sexuality like Cal place so much importance in being a top and not a bottom. They need to in some ways still feel like at least they weren't the one being dominated. While Cal and Jules' sex scene was an illustration of what it looks like when a man is committed to performing this kind of hypermasculinity, McKay and Cassie's season 1 premiere sex scene was an illustration of what it looks like when a boy feels pressured to perform masculinity in this way. McKay and Cassie were about to have sex for the first time, but after listening to Nate and all his gang of misogynists all afternoon, call Cassie a slut and tell him that he had to her in an aggressive way because that's how you sluts. Despite McKay's genuine feelings for Cassie and his disagreement with how the boys perceived her and thought she should be treated, Nate's peer pressure still led him to approaching sex with Cassie just as Nate's father had approached sex with Jules. McKay tries to choke Cassie, but unlike Jules, Cassie stops him and tells him she doesn't like that. At which point, a very apologetic and nervous McKay realizes that he's been led astray by Nate's bad advice. We'll talk more about this later when we talk about Cassie and Jules more specifically, but I don't want to move past these incidents without making clear that while neither Jules nor Cassie liked being manhandled without their explicit consent, the difference in how they responded had everything to do with who they are, who they were dealing with, and what they felt they could do. Cassie was having sex with her pair, who had up until that point been especially kind and thoughtful towards her, so she felt safe enough to speak up. Jules didn't speak up because it wouldn't be safe, or at least it wouldn't feel safe. Imagine being an underage trans girl in a room with a large, brolic-ass adult man who has a secret to keep, in a new town where she doesn't know anybody, in a motel where no one knows where she is if something happens. There was no reason that she would feel safe to speak up when the strange adult man she thought she wanted to have sex with suddenly starts manhandling her. That shit was probably scary and why she quickly left afterwards and went to McKay's house party. And there's more to why Jules didn't speak up, but we'll discuss it when we get to Jules' section. Back to Nate, his dad, and McKay. Nate, Nate's father Cal, and Nate's friend McKay demonstrate how pervasive and far-reaching the tentacles of toxic masculinity and misogyny are, and how men like Cal become exactly what oppresses them, create what oppresses them, and then trains what they've created to oppress others. So that by the time you look, it's not just Cal who's miserable as the result of the chains of toxic masculinity, he makes his son miserable too.
I would like to make a toast to Nathaniel, the winner of all winners, the king of all kings, the big swinging dick, Mr. Big Balls. Huh? You are a part of me I will never understand.
Then his son makes his friends miserable.
Oh, you fucker? Oh, man, we're just having a conversation. Trying to tell me you took her in that room and you didn't dick her down?
Nah, didn't.
I don't believe you. Come on, tell me the truth.
That's the truth. We took her in the room, had a conversation. That was it.
Are you trying to tell me that you didn't miss those titties?
Come on, bro.
I knew it. I knew it, you dirty motherfucker. You dirty motherfucker. You wear a condom?
Come on, bro.
Oh, you wear a condom? You dirty motherfucker.
Chill.
You dirty motherfucker. Yo, where'd you come?
Bro, chill.
Where'd you come?
Chill.
Come in her mouth?
Bro,
Yo, you come in her belly? Or you come in her
what's wrong
condom?
with you, bro?
You come in her condom?
Chill, bro. Chill. Yeah.
Hi. Happy New Year's, motherfucker.
Happy New Year.
And then his son also makes any woman he encounters, even indirectly, miserable, which is why every woman who comes across Nate leaves with significant trauma. Shit, even Rue tells us on the first episode that Nate once tried to finger her without her consent.
In truth, I didn't have much of an issue with Nate until all the bullshit with Jules. I mean, I never liked him. And once during freshman formal, he tried to finger me on the dance floor without my permission.
Nate's father put the battery in his back, so Nate puts the battery in McKay's back, and it's Maddy and Cassie who suffer as the result, which is the way of the world. Men suffer under patriarchy, and then they inflict that suffering upon others. When Nate's masculinity feels threatened by Maddy other guy, how does he try to reclaim it? By harassing and threatening to beat the out of Jules. When Nate's masculinity feels threatened by Maddy asserting herself, what does he do? chokes out. When Nate's masculinity feels threatened by Maddy discovering his father sleeping with an underage trans girl, what does he do? Pull a gun on her. When we meet Nate and see him interact with Rue, Jules, Maddy, Cassie, McKay, or really anyone, what we get is an angry, violent, and dangerous young man. And he is that. But it's not until we see Nate's home life and how his dad treats him that we realize how he came to be. Nate's father's self-hate made him miserable, and it made him hate his son. But not only does he hate his son, all he's had to give his son was misery and hate. So now Nate hates himself. And the only way he knows how to deal with all that anger and the hate he has for himself and his father is to abuse anyone weaker than him. So the result is a big ass raining terror down on his itty bitty girlfriends. Nate has tons of incredible scenes and lots of climactic moments, but he never changes. He does not ever become a good guy, which isn't just because of everything I told you earlier about the purposes of characters in this show being to show, not grow. It's also because in real life, misogynistic boys who are raised by misogynistic men do not just suddenly become good guys. Who Nate isn't just about a choice he makes in the morning or something a traumatic event or a new season could just change. The violent, angry, abusive, and fundamentally unhappy young man that Nate is the culmination of an entire school of thought his father quite literally beat into him. That's all he knows. Anger is the only emotion he was ever allowed to feel, and violence is the only way he's ever been allowed to express it.
Why is it that you only have the bad qualities of your father and none of the good qualities?
Okay, right. So Kyle's a fucking saint now.
That's not what I said.
That's literally what you fucking said.
No, it's not. He's deeply flawed, and somehow, some way, we raised a child who's even more deeply flawed. Do you ever wonder about that? Do you just like, what went wrong? Do you ever think about that? No, of course you don't. Because your fucking dumbass dad didn't believe in therapy, so self-reflection's off the table. It's just...
And to me, the point of this, the takeaway, is that toxic masculinity, misogyny, the patriarchy, gender roles, ruins lives. It ruins the lives of everyone who subscribes to it, and it ruins the lives of everyone affected by it. And the only way to undo it is by deliberate and explicit acknowledgement and rejection and unlearning of that system. Nate was not given a reason to change. He does not understand why his or his dad's life is so f***ed up. He does not understand why he's so angry or what's so wrong about the things he does, because he has been raised to believe that he's being what a man is supposed to be. I know why Nate is the way he is, but Nate doesn't, so of course he never changed. But I'm telling you, so y'all don't have any excuse. Nate could not change because the people responsible for making him that way, his parents, quite literally sit in his face, telling him he's a horrible person while gaslighting him about how he became that way. Like they're not the reason why.
Living a double life? Not my biggest regret. You are.
The gaslighting so wild in Nate's house, by the time his daddy tells them what's really going down and what he really up to, he turns around and blames them for being homophobic. Like he ain't the one who ingrained the homophobia within them.
You know how many men I've fucked?
What? Dad, why are you saying this?
I had sex with a man for the first time when you were in your mama's belly.
Dad, why the fuck are you saying these things? Like, have you lost your fucking mind? You're talking about fucking men in front of mom when I was what? Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Who the fuck are you?
If I said tonight that I went to the strip club and I picked up a real grade A piece of ass and I fucked the shit out of her in my truck, you wouldn't be 1/10 as appalled as you are right now. Fuck you. Fuck you. You're a bunch of fucking hypocrites. I'm a man. I'll fuck whoever I want, whenever I want. I'll fuck men, I'll fuck women, I'll fuck transsexuals, and I'll have a mighty fine time doing it.
While Nate, his father, and McKay all illustrated the perils of conforming to a rigid and toxic definition of masculinity, I think Cassie, Maddy, Kat, and Jules all illustrate not only the different effects that toxic masculinity and misogyny have on different kinds of girls and women, but they also illustrate how different kinds of girls and women feel and respond to the pressure to perform a limited understanding of femininity and womanhood. Let's talk about it. We're introduced to Cassie, Maddy, and Kat as a trio, and their struggles overlap in many ways. Side note, I don't know if anyone peeped this, but the scene when we're introduced to Kat and Maddy hanging out with another girl at Maddy's house, and Maddy's in the mirror complaining about her features while Kat is lounging around reassuring her, had to be homage to the scene in Mean Girls where the Plastics and Katie are in Regina's room, and the Plastics are sharing their insecurities in the mirror while a confused Katie struggles to join in. Anyway, our society talks a lot about the pressures men face, and we're starting to discuss more and more the pressure men face to perform particular kinds of masculinity and the perils of toxic masculinity. But we rarely discuss the pressure to perform particular kinds of femininity and the consequences of doing so. Cassie, Maddy, Jules, and Kat are all illustrations of how no girl or woman avoids this pressure or the stereotypes and traumas it all comes along with. Maddy was played by the gorgeous and notoriously mysterious Alexa Demie, whose character Maddy is responsible for the show's most iconic looks, aesthetic, and makeup style. She served nothing but looks the entire show, and we love to see it. But what's more important about Maddy to me is that despite how undeniably beautiful she is, how confident she appears to be, how much power she appears to exude, it's just a performance.
I think I'm gonna get back together with Nate. It's a mistake, right?
Don't do it.
I don't know if I can help it.
I wish you could see yourself the way the rest of the world does.
Maddy feels obligated to perform for men, to use her looks, sex, and actions to get what she wants out of men. Even when the men she's doing it for mistreat her, and she doesn't enjoy what she has to do to get or keep them, and she never actually gets what she wants. That's what she's come to believe is a necessity for her to get the kind of life she wants or to be in control.
She quickly realized that there are two kinds of people in the world. People who sit in the chairs with their feet in the footbath, and the people who kneel in front of the footbath. She used to sit and study the women who came in. She'd pay attention to what they wore, what they'd talk about, and what she realized was that none of them actually did anything. I mean, they may have children to raise or homes to decorate, but at the end of the day, they literally did nothing. They literally did nothing. And strangely, none of them had confidence.
And I feel compelled to drive the point that Maddy isn't the one in control home, because both society and the Euphoria writers have a dangerous habit of painting young girls like Maddy out to be the problem. We call them fresh, grown, slut-shame them, and absolve them from how grown men take advantage of them. Maddy thinks that by transforming herself into what a man most desires, that she's in control, because she thinks she's the one doing the manipulating. But in actuality, all she's doing is shrinking herself into a rigid definition of what she's allowed to be. And the men around her, the predators around her, take advantage of that.
Virgin? Because the truth is that when she was 14 on vacation in Panama City Beach, she met a guy who was 40.
Hey, you from around here?
Which, in retrospect, seems kind of rapey and weird, but honestly, she was the one in control.
Let me explain something that it is very important that we understand in a show that casually depicted and referenced statutory rape via Jules and Maddy. Minors cannot consent to sex with an adult. Statutory rape is what's called a strict liability crime, which means it does not matter how old the minor told you they were, how old you thought they were, how grown they seem, none of it. If you minor, it is statutory rape. Your intent does not matter in the eyes of the law. The reason being that a child cannot understand like we understand as grown adults the problem with sleeping with an adult, or why it's not right or unequal, or why they can't consent to it, or why they're being taken advantage of. So the law preempts a child's naivete and holds adults who them criminally responsible, which means Jules legally did not consent to sex with Nate's dad because she could not consent to it. It does not matter that she told him she was 22. That's what it means for a crime to be strict liability. So likewise, a 14-year-old Maddy could not consent to sex with a 40-year-old man, nor could she be in control. So no, Euphoria, a 40-year-old man a 14-year-old girl doesn't just seem rapey and weird, it is rapey and weird. What the is wrong with y'all?
Right to jail, right away.
But since we're talking about Jules anyway, let's get into my favorite lesson learned from Jules. But before we do that, Aaron insisted on a Hunter Schafer fan cam. So do your big one, Aaron. This is your moment.
I wish you could see yourself the way the rest of the world does.
Remember I said earlier when we were talking about Jules and Nate's daddy that there was another reason why she didn't object to his manhandling despite how visibly uncomfortable she was. And that reason is because Jules feels pressured to perform femininity. Jules eventually admits that she doesn't even like men, but as a trans girl trying to establish her own sense of femininity and womanhood by modeling it after what she's learned from cisgender women in the world, she's learned that sleeping with men, whether you like it or not, is a part of the gig. And she feels like she'll be more likely to be accepted as a woman by behaving like a cis woman as opposed to behaving like a queer woman. But even after admitting this to herself and deciding she wasn't gonna mess with men anymore in season 2, Jules ends up cheating on Rue and getting with an irrelevant ass addition to the show, Elliot. But I bring it up because this felt like character regression to a lot of people. But just like I think relapse is a part of recovery from addiction, I think it's a part of this kind of recovery too. The recovery from a male-centered existence will have relapse. Like Jules admits, she doesn't get with men because she likes them or wants to. She does it to validate her womanhood and femininity in a world that will always challenge it. Why would I not expect this teenage trans girl to struggle in her effort to completely stop a practice that she has previously relied on for validation and gender affirmation? It makes sense. But what I like most about this admission from Jules is that she didn't just admit something about herself. In her admission, she essentially held a mirror up to all women and gave us the opportunity to reflect on how often we date, sleep with, or pursue men because we think we should as women, or because we want to be validated, not because we like them. But speaking of wanting to be validated, let's talk about Cassie. The sad thing about the Maddys of the world simply performing a kind of womanhood is that unfortunately, the Cassies of the world bend over backwards trying to be the Maddys and feeling bad about themselves that it doesn't come natural to them, never realizing that it doesn't come natural to the Maddys either. Everyone is just performing roles that make them miserable, ironically enough, in their quest for euphoria. It's some sad shit, which is why I understand how Cassie, despite being the pinnacle of white beauty standards and desirability politics, could be so insecure and envious of Maddy's perceived confidence that she erroneously believed that by being chosen over Maddy, being picked, she would feel validated and better about herself, which is how she started sleeping with her best friend Maddy's abusive ex-boyfriend Nate. But not only is she wrong about how she thinks being picked by Nate would make her feel, Nate doesn't initially pick her. He slept with her in secret while still trying to get that old thing back with Maddy, which only ended up making Cassie feel worse.
You telling me that you love me and then going and being in a relationship with my best friend.
What the fuck? What the fuck is wrong with you? What the fuck is wrong with you?
Okay. Bye.
Cassie didn't truly want Nate. She's competing with Maddy, who she feels inferior to and wishes she could be like. That's why she didn't just start Nate. She started dressing like and trying to be like Maddy because she wants to feel how she thinks Maddy feels. She wants to be the kind of woman she thinks Maddy is. She thinks that it'll make her happy and that it'll make her safe, but it doesn't, because it can't. In season 1, lots of people liked and sympathized with Sydney Sweeney's portrayal of Cassie, a hypersexualized teenager who was perceived as a bimbo because she was blonde and had big boobs, was routinely slut-shamed by her classmates, mistreated by her alcoholic mother, made to feel like all she is her body and her looks, and objectified by everyone around her, and she gets pregnant and has to have an abortion. And people also liked her relationship with McKay, who was a kind and interesting character who felt worth empathizing with. However, a lot of those people who loved her in season 1 hate her in season 2 because they see it as character regression for her to go from nice guy McKay to becoming a pick-me for her best friend's abusive ex-boyfriend. But I think that's exactly how life goes. Cassie is there to illustrate to us the horrible choices girls and women can make when they have been taught not to see any value in themselves beyond their looks, have had to live at the mercy of the male gaze, and when none of their trauma ever gets unpacked or addressed. Of course, Cassie would come to believe that being picked or validated by a man would heal her. And not just any man, Nate. Nate is the man who in season 1 was responsible for solidifying Cassie's reputation as a slut, people's mistreatment of her, and tried to poison her then boyfriend McKay's perception of her. And this might seem like exactly why it doesn't make sense that Cassie got with Nate, but think about it. Not only did Nate ruin Cassie's reputation, he's so on top of the food chain as the most hyperly masculine one of the boys, that despite Maddy boy in the pool in front of everyone, just by virtue of being Nate's girl, the girl he picked, no one ever talked to or about Maddy the way they talked to or about Cassie. So of course, Cassie would want to be chosen by Nate. Of course she'd think he could save her. Just as Maddy believed being a particular kind of woman and being Nate's girl could solve all her problems and give her the life she wanted, so too did Cassie believe that. Just like addiction is born out of trauma, so too are pick-me's. And that's the lesson we get from Cassie. But me understanding why Cassie operates the way she operates does not mean I was any less elated when Maddy found out and decided to beat her ass, okay? But Maddy wanted freedom, Jules wanted to affirm her womanhood, and Cassie wanted to feel better about herself. Maddy, Jules, and Cassie all tried to use sex with men as a means to an end, but those ends were rarely met, and they were mostly left with more trauma as a result. And our girl Kat was not an exception. But while most shows tend to illustrate only the Kats of the world as struggling with their self-esteem and feeling desirable, Euphoria showed us that the Maddys and Cassies of the world are fighting the same insecurities. All that's different is how their insecurities come to be and how they act them out. So, last but not least, it's time to talk about my girl Kat. Kat was one of my favorite characters in the show, despite being rendered irrelevant in season 2. Kat was played by certified baddie Barbie Ferreira. People make the same mistake with Kat that they make with Maddy. They mistake them performing hyperconfidence and control for actual confidence and actually being in control, which is not the case. Despite being a thick baddie, Kat is seen as fat and undesirable by the boys around her, who call her fat to her face, and she's pressured sexually, not just by the boys hoping to exploit her desire to be seen and desired by them. She's also pressured by her girlfriends like Jules, who tell her things like she needs to catch a dick, because as we've established, that's what Jules and the other girls think they need to be doing to prove that they're grown women now or that they're desirable, regardless of whether or not that's something they actually want to do. The result of this is that Kat ends up becoming an underage cam girl because she was able to be validated and desired by unknown men on the internet when she otherwise felt invisible in school. What follows is my girl losing her virginity to some random nobody, then having random, meaningless, non-pleasurable sex with any Tom, Dick, and Harry she could find. The only positive change that came from this arc for Kat was her aesthetic, cause the new look was eating, I ain't gonna lie. 8 down. But Kat doesn't end up any happier. Quite the opposite. Eventually, she does get a really nice boyfriend, but she comes to resent, mistreat, and dump him. But I think that had more to do with the behind-the-scenes drama of the show, because Sam Levinson decided to punish Barbie Ferreira. She objected to his desire to give her character an eating disorder in season 2. And I think she was absolutely right to dig her heels in about that. I don't think there was anything positive that could have been gained by depicting that in a show that will simply depict it without making any real or explicit point to condemn the behavior. All it would have done is contributed to the idea that Kat and girls like Kat couldn't be or feel desirable as they are, and we didn't need that. They had already illustrated to us how Kat's self-esteem was negatively impacted by other people's perception of her weight and her desirability, and the consequences of her trying to transform herself into the version of her that those people could see as desirable. So the eating disorder would have been redundant at best, harmful at worst. But we have finally arrived at the end of the video. And I know, I didn't talk about one of the fan favorites, Fezco, but I didn't forget him, and I would not end this video without making sure that we pour one out for the late Angus Cloud, who unfortunately passed away in 2023 at just 25 years old. Rest in peace to him. Run the song one time for the one time, Aaron.
I really miss my nigga. I really miss my nigga. White people you can sing it to, just change that N to a W. Miss my wigger.